My parents told me there wouldn't be space for me at the annual family retreat. Not enough room, they said. 2 weeks later, I watched 66 names appear on the guest list. My 4 siblings, their spouses, their kids, even cousins and distant friends. Everyone had a place. Everyone but me. I didn't fight. I didn't argue. I stayed silent. And then 9 hours later, my mother was screaming in front of everyone. I'm Julian, and this is the story of how being erased by my own family forced me to take back my voice. But before I share my story with you, I'd love to know you're here with me. Drop a simple hi in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far my story can reach. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. And if you find my story worth listening to, please consider subscribing to this channel. It helps me keep sharing these moments of truth, and it means I don't have to carry them alone. When I look back, I can still smell the pine of the Carson cabin, the way the wood creaked under our feet, the way the nights glowed because I strung up dollar store lights like they were chandeliers. I was the one who turned those gatherings into something worth remembering. I picked the playlists grilled, the food turned a cold cabin into a celebration. Everyone used to laugh and say I was the heartbeat of our traditions. And when the family upgraded to crystal shores in Lake Tahoe with glass walls and lakeside views, I carried that same spirit. I planned, booked, organized, filmed, edited. The Hartwell family highlight reels, those were mine. But then came the collapse. The startup I had poured myself into went under, and the life I had built in Silicon Valley evaporated. Aspen's betrayal, 3 years with someone else while still wearing my ring, split me in half. Divorce papers signed, I moved from a modern condo in Reno to a shoebox apartment. My family's sympathy lasted about a week before it morphed into a smirk. To them, I wasn't just hurting, I was failing. My siblings thrived. Ryder, the golden heir, built real estate towers and posted pictures of his kids skiing double black diamonds. Talia wrote award-winning exposés and posed with her twins for glossy magazine features. Jackson signed with a record label, Ivy dressed him like a runway model, and their toddler became a YouTube sensation. Lila waved protest signs with her husband, and their genius kids won science fairs. And me, I became the cautionary tale. Mom curated it perfectly on Instagram. Family first, she captioned, with all of them in designer coats against the snowy lake. My face was absent. Instead, Aspen's smile beamed back at me through the screen. My ex-wife, still welcomed, still praised as graceful and perfect. Celeste made sure everyone saw that even tagging Aspen in photos I wasn't invited to take. The memory that won't leave me is Thanksgiving last year. I sat at the end of the table, wedged between sticky-fingered children, handed a gift card while my siblings unwrapped watches engraved with initials, luxury spa packages, custom art. I laughed it off like it didn't sting, but inside it hollowed me out. I told myself I still belonged. I told myself I was being sensitive. But that night, walking back to my apartment with the cold air cutting my face, I whispered a question I couldn't silence. Maybe I really was the problem. Because my family adored Aspen. Because they still celebrated her presence while quietly erasing mine. And if they loved the woman who betrayed me more than they could stand to look at me, what did that make me in their eyes? It was a Tuesday night when the phone rang. Mom's voice carried that familiar sweetness laced with control. Julian, about the retreat this year. We had to make some tough decisions. There just isn't enough room for you. I pressed the phone tighter. Not enough room. The place sleeps dozens. Well, she sighed. We prioritized couples, the kids, and some extended family. You understand. I can sleep on the couch. I can rent a room nearby. Her tone sharpened. It's not about logistics. It's your energy. We can't have your negativity affecting the atmosphere. The words burned. Negativity. As if heartbreak and job loss were contagious, like I was a virus to quarantine. I tried reaching out to the others. Dad brushed me off. We have to keep numbers reasonable. You know that. Ryder shrugged. I don't make the list. Talia said I'm too busy with the kids to get involved. Jackson added, they have their reasons, don't blow it up. And Lila, sweet Lila, whispered, I don't want to fight with Mom. That's when the first crack widened. Lila accidentally forwarded me the detailed cabin assignments. I scrolled and froze. Cabin 6, Talia, Finn, their twins. And Aspen. My ex-wife. She wasn't just invited, she was given a bed. And then the second cut came fast. Harper Ryder's wife posted a boomerang of suitcases lined up epic Hartwell family reunion. Hashtags filled the screen. Family vibes, just together again. I clicked the group chat link. It didn't exist for me. They'd built a new one without me. Alone in my apartment, phone buzzing with a world I was locked out of, I stared at the ceiling. 66 people. Siblings, in-laws, cousins, even friends. Everyone had a place. Everyone except me. And the story they spun to others that I was busy in Seattle. A lie smooth enough to erase me without anyone questioning why. The weight of it pressed down until I couldn't breathe. Invisible. Unwanted. Exiled from my own blood. I sat there in silence, a single thought gnawing through me. Maybe I never had a place at that table after all. Vesper showed up without knocking, a cardboard pizza box balanced on her forearm and a six-pack sweating through the rings. She didn't sit until she'd looked me over like a triage nurse. I tried to say I was fine. She rolled her eyes, popped a beer, and set the slice in my hand like a prescription. I told her everything Mom's call, the careful phrasing about my energy, the group chat. I wasn't in the way the word "not enough" lodged in my throat. She listened, her jaw tightening by degrees. "This isn't about space," she said finally. "This is punishment. You didn't play the part they wrote for you. You left a marriage that made them look good." I stared at the window, at my own reflection ghosted over Reno's lights. I can't make them see me. "Stop asking to be seen at their table," she said. "Build your own." It sounded reckless and simple, the kind of advice people post under sunset photos, but coming from her, it landed with weight. She'd known me since college, before the curated dinners and the highlight reels. She was there when I taught myself to edit video on a secondhand laptop, when I learned that mood is built from tiny choices, timing, color, the breath between beats. "You've always been the architect of vibe," she said. "So, architect one." I nodded, not ready to agree out loud. She took another sip, then added softer, "Nova texted me. She asked if I was going to miss you in Seattle." "Seattle," I repeated. She didn't make that up. Someone told her. "They're not just excluding you. They're controlling the story of why." The room felt smaller. I pictured my mother's hands arranging silverware, my father smiling like a CEO in a quarterly meeting, everyone speaking in gentle half-phrases that said nothing and achieved everything. I wanted to say they meant well. The words died on my tongue. The next afternoon, I sat in Dr. Sage's office, a warm rectangle of sunlight pooling across the rug. She had that therapist stillness that makes you aware of your own fidgeting. I told her about the call, about the text chain, about the sudden discovery that my ex-wife had a bed where I didn't. She asked how long I'd been the event planner of our family. "Since the beginning," I said. "It was my way to matter. And when you stopped performing, they stopped clapping," I said, surprised by the bite in my own voice. She nodded. "Your family values achievement over authenticity. You organize joy." They applauded. "When life demanded you be human, grief, failure, anger, you didn't fit the picture. The consequence is exclusion dressed up as logistics." I told her what Talia had said when Aspen left, that I was too rigid. I told her how Jackson suggested couples counseling even after he admitted he knew Aspen was seeing someone. I repeated my father's sentence from years earlier, the one that still made my skin heat. "If you'd been more flexible, she wouldn't have strayed." "That's not flexibility," Dr. Sage said. "That's erasure." "And Mom?" I asked. "She posts Aspen like she's family." "She's curating an image in which your divorce isn't a crack," Dr. Sage said. "It's easier to keep Aspen than to sit with your pain." Something settled and then snapped. It wasn't that I hadn't seen it. It was that I hadn't allowed myself to name it. They were protecting the Hartwell brand. They were smoothing me out of the frame because I no longer matched the color palette. I drove home in silence. The city felt stripped a set without extras. I turned off the lamps and lay on the floor, the pizza box cold on the counter, the beer sweating onto a ring it would leave behind. The ceiling blurred and cleared. I thought of that end seat at Thanksgiving, the dull thud of a gift card, the way everyone's laughter warmed the air while mine scraped my throat. I thought of 66 names and the one left off. I let the hurt crest. I let it flood. When the tears were gone, a clean, bright anger remained. Not the kind that burns everything. The kind that lights a path. If they needed me invisible to keep their picture centered, then I would make something too luminous to ignore. Not a speech, not a fight, a scene. My scene. By morning, the plan had a pulse. I didn't want to crash their party. I wanted to make my own. A table built where I was welcome by design. A place that said without permission or apology, I belong. I grabbed my notebook, wrote 3 names, Milo, Kieran, Sienna, and underlined them twice. The pen bled through the page. It felt like forward motion. I texted Vesper, I'm doing it. She replied with a single word that filled the room. Good. I found the house by accident, which is to say I found it the way you find everything in my family on my mother's Instagram. She'd tagged the resort, and in a nearby photo, a rental agency had geotagged a hill above the lake. Moonlit Haven. The listing made my pulse jump. 9 bedrooms, an infinity pool that spilled into the horizon, a private dock reaching like a fingertip toward Tahoe's cold blue. It was pricey and glossy, and, according to the small print, newly available due to a last-minute cancellation. I called. Ms. Blair answered with the soft efficiency of someone who manages other people's vacations for a living. I told her the truth. I needed a place for a week immediately with full amenities, and I could pay, but I needed mercy. We had a cancellation, she said. If you can take the dates as is, I can extend a 45% reduction. I said yes before she finished the sentence. Contracts pinged my inbox. I signed with the same hand that had once signed divorce papers. This time the pen didn't shake. Then the calls. Milo, who knew every vendor within 100 miles. Kieran, who could turn a parking lot into a dance floor. Sienna, whose camera made everything look like memory even as it happened. I told them what I wanted: a week that felt like oxygen, not revenge. A reclaiming, you host, Kieran said. We'll scaffold. We caravanned up the mountain behind sunset. Moonlit Haven glowed like a glass lantern. Inside, the floors smelled faintly of lemon oil, and the windows cut the lake into wide strokes of silver. My friends dropped bags and let out those involuntary exclamations people make when a space surprises them. The screening room hummed when we tested it. The pool lap line caught the last of the light. I stood on the deck with a beer and felt my shoulders lower an inch. Night 1 was simple on purpose. Burgers on the grill, a local Pinot that Milo insisted on, a playlist I made without thinking too hard. The air was cold enough to keep us close together. Sienna lifted her phone and filmed the flames for 3 seconds, the exact length she says a viewer will watch without commitment. Julian's epic getaway, she captioned. I laughed and told her not to jinx me. She said, you can't jinx what you build. Morning arrived with a sky so clear it felt fabricated. We slid kayaks into the water and paddled toward the cove that curls between Moonlit Haven's dock and the resort beach. The lake is honest. It tells you the temperature of your courage. My arms burned in a way I liked. When we rounded the pier, I saw them, my family, in a perfect tableau on Crystal Shore's private stretch. Ryder loose-limbed in a chair, Talia corralling twins' dad in a sun hat that read like a joke, Mom talking with her hands. For half a second, instinct told me to turn. Instead, I raised my paddle and waved. Ryder squinted, then stood. Talia shaded her eyes. Dad lifted his chin as if finding focus through a lens. Mom froze mid-gesture, her fingers splayed. None of them waved back. I didn't stop to read it. I kept moving. The kayak sliced a clean line through the water and the wake stitched itself closed behind me. We cleaned up after lunch and drove into town for a late reservation at Lakeview Vines. It's a place that pretends it isn't fancy. Edison bulbs, wood tables, a patio that frames the lake like a postcard. We'd just sat when a familiar voice said my name like it had been practicing. Julie and Aunt Nora stood by the host stand with Talia and Mom flanking her. The timing felt scripted and accidental at once. Aren't you in Seattle? Nora asked, genuinely puzzled. I smiled. Change of plans. I'm at Moonlit Haven for the week. Silence rearranged itself around us. Talia's eyes flicked to my friends, to the camera on the table, to the hostess waiting to seat them. Mom's face did that thing where she goes still as if stillness could make her invisible. "We didn't know you were here," she said. I waved this morning, I answered, friendly as a weatherman. Nora recovered first, delighted. "Well, that's wonderful. Family everywhere." We all stood there, the lake reflecting a sheet of light through the glass. I didn't mention the call. I didn't ask why Aspen had a bed. I didn't demand anything. I let the facts stand up on their own legs. The hostess cleared her throat and guided them toward a table. Mom touched my elbow as she passed. It wasn't affection. It was a plea to keep the picture intact. Back at the house, evenings stretched long and easy. The chef Kieran booked carved tri-tip in clean practiced motions. Laughter rose and fell. Sienna wandered with her lens and caught the moments that feel small and live forever. The way Vesper pressed a napkin into my hand when I pretended I didn't need one. The way Milo stacked plates like a gambler shuffling chips the exact second the pool darkened into a mirror. I didn't post any of it. I didn't need to. The point wasn't to prove I was happy. The point was to be. Before bed, I stood alone on the dock and listened to the water knocking softly against the wood. Somewhere across the lake, my family was telling a story about where I was and why. Here, my own story breathed beside me. I didn't plan a confrontation. I didn't stage a scene. I only set a table and left the door open. And already, without a single argument, the edges of their version had begun to fray. By the third day, Moonlit Haven no longer felt like a retreat for friends. It had turned into a magnet. The dock clattered with jet skis. The driveway echoed with the thump of a basketball against pavement as Milo dragged a portable hoop onto the gravel and set it up like a crown jewel. The wood-fired pizza oven glowed, turning dough and cheese into smoke and memory, while Rory's camera swept across every corner, catching details I barely noticed until I saw them played back the splash of a ball through a net, the way steam curled from a plate. The kids were first. Riders 3 showed up at the dock in their ski jackets, begging for a ride on the jet skis. Their faces carried the same stubborn insistence I used to have when I was their age, and their parents gave in. Talia's twins followed, laughing as if the water was theirs to claim. They weren't supposed to leave the resort without an escort, but rules dissolved the moment they saw the lake from my deck. "Can we stay here tonight?" one of them asked between bites of pizza. I had to laugh. Then Nova appeared, dragging a towel behind her with Uncle Reed in tow. They said they were just stopping by, but the stop stretched into hours. Nova filmed a jet ski run and posted it before I even realized. Reed, usually stoic, leaned against the railing with a drink, watching the scene with something that looked like relief. I could see it in their faces, the difference between orchestrated family unity and something that simply breathed. But not everyone was pleased. My mother found me by the side gate as the evening wound down, her face set tight. "You're doing this on purpose," she hissed. "You're trying to ruin what we built." I steadied my voice. "I didn't ruin anything. I only created space for myself when you refused to." Her mouth opened and closed before she stormed off, the sound of her heels clipping against the stone. Later, my father approached me alone, his posture less rigid than usual. He didn't yell or argue. His tone was softer than I'd heard in years. "Perhaps we mishandled this," he admitted, his eyes not quite meeting mine. It was the closest he had come to apology, and though it wasn't enough, it lodged inside me as something rare. Meanwhile, the outside world was watching. Sienna's posts snippets of kids cannonballing into the pool, a wide shot of the pizza oven firing against the dark, laughter carrying over the music circulated fast. Comments poured in, real family goals. "This is the life, forget resorts. This is the place to be." The polished image my parents pushed online was being overshadowed by a version they couldn't curate. It was almost enough to make me forget that Aspen was still hovering like a ghost in their camp. That reminder came when Nova whispered to me later that night. She'd overheard Aspen at the fire pit, drunk enough to let her mask slip, telling relatives that I was too sensitive, never fun, always dragging everyone down. It stung, but Nova's voice carried a spark. Talia heard it too. For the first time, doubt was spreading in their camp. Aspen's perfect mask had cracked, and the story about me no longer sounded airtight. By the end of the night, Moonlit Haven glowed with a different kind of light. Children slept on couches, Reed dozed by the fire, my friends stacked wine glasses in the sink. I looked around and felt a calm certainty the pull had shifted. The center of gravity no longer belonged to Crystal Shores. It was here. The path between the resort and moonlit haven was narrow-lined with stone and pine, a corridor of silence that carried sound too well. I was walking it near dusk, the lake behind me glowing with the last threads of light when they appeared. A cluster waiting my father, my mother Talia Aspen, and several cousins who shifted uncomfortably as if they'd been drafted into service. My mother stepped forward first, her voice sharp enough to pierce the air. Julian has always been the same. He can't hold down a job. He couldn't keep his wife. And now instead of accepting his failures, he wants to tear the family apart. The words landed like stones, but before I could reply, another voice rose. Talia's. Her tone cracked the silence in a way I hadn't heard in years. Stop. Aspen lied to him. For 3 years. Finn found the messages on her phone. She betrayed him, not the other way around. So stop using her to make him the villain. The air shifted. Aspen stiffened her eyes, darting her hands, clutching her bag. This isn't the place she began, but Nova's voice cut across her. You invited Aspen and pushed Julian out. That's cruel. That's not family. The group rippled with murmurs. Cousins looked at one another, uncomfortable but nodding. The facade cracked. Aspen's face went pale. She muttered something about needing to take a call and hurried away, her heels scraping against the stone until the sound disappeared. And then my mother faltered. Her words thinned. Her shoulders shook in the dying light. She turned and walked off toward the cabins, refusing dinner, refusing the eyes on her. For years she had orchestrated perfection, and in that moment, it all collapsed. I stood in the center of them, the supposed black sheep, the expendable name, the erased son. Yet I felt none of the smallness they had assigned me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't strike back. I simply let their own words hang in the air, heavy and undeniable. My father stayed rooted for a moment, his jaw tense. Then he lowered his gaze, muttered something to no one in particular, and followed my mother's retreat. The others lingered, caught between two realities, the image they had clung to and the truth that now refused to be unseen. For the first time, I wasn't outside looking in. I was the center, the undeniable presence, the one who could no longer be erased. I walked back toward Moonlit Haven with the evening air cold in my lungs, my steps steady. The storm had broken, and it hadn't drowned me. It had revealed me. The retreat would go on, but nothing about it was the same. The illusion was cracked, the truth visible, and my place no longer negotiable. I didn't have to beg for a seat at their table. I had built my own, and they had all been forced to see it. By the 5th day, there was no longer a clear border between the two worlds. Moonlit Haven had grown into something too radiant to ignore, and the gravity of its pull reached all the way to Crystal Shores. That afternoon, we dragged long wooden tables down toward the shoreline, stacking benches end to end until it felt like a banquet hall laid against the water. Strings of bulbs stretched between trees, and Milo coaxed fire into the grill while music drifted through the speakers, not loud enough to demand attention, but steady enough to loosen the air. At first, the arrivals were hesitant. A cousin wandered over, claiming she only wanted to borrow ice. An uncle followed, curious about the oven and its smoke. Then came the children sprinting ahead with basketballs and dripping swimsuits, their laughter too loud to reel back. Before long, entire families walked the path from Crystal Shores, carrying bottles of wine or trays of food like offerings. The awkwardness clung for a while, everyone unsure if they were crossing enemy lines. But as the sky deepened into evening, the warmth of Moonlit Haven took over. The awkward small talk gave way to real laughter. The tight shoulders began to drop. Ryder was the first of my siblings to stand up, his voice breaking the chatter. I should have said this sooner, he admitted, looking not just at me, but at the circle of relatives around us. I stayed quiet when I should have spoken. I let Mom and Dad treat you unfairly. I didn't defend you, and that was wrong. His words landed heavier than the clink of glasses. For the first time, I saw his mask of success slip to reveal something truer: guilt, and maybe a hint of shame. Not long after Lila reached me, her face streaked with tears she wasn't bothering to hide. She wrapped her arms around me so tightly it startled me. I was scared of her, she confessed, her voice shaking. I didn't want to fight Mom, so I stayed silent. I should have stood up for you. I'm so sorry. The dam was breaking. Talia, who had once echoed my mother's words about me being rigid, stepped forward next. She didn't waver. It wasn't you. It was Aspen. She lied, she betrayed you, and we let her stand in your place. That was our choice, not yours. And I won't let us keep choosing her over you. The declaration rang like a bell, slicing through years of pretense. A collective murmur spread across the table, the balance of loyalty visibly shifting. Then my father approached, asking me to walk with him toward the dock. The lake stretched out in the distance, silent but vast, like it was listening. His face was tired, older than I'd ever let myself see. We thought Aspen was easier, he admitted, voice low. She smiled, she charmed, she never challenged. You were harder, but it's clear now. We chose wrong. He looked out at the water, then back at me. I'm sorry. I felt no rush of triumph, no desire to gloat. Instead, I answered simply, I don't need a place handed to me. I built my own. Walking back to the fire, I realized I no longer sought the kind of validation I had craved for years. I was standing tall, not because they finally said I deserved it, but because I had created a space where I belonged without permission. That night, Moonlit Haven glowed brighter than the resort. The tables were alive with conversation, the fire crackled, and the lake mirrored every light we strung above it. Crystal Shores, in comparison, seemed distant and dim, a background rather than the stage. The truth was out in the open now, undeniable, and the image of perfection my parents clung to had dissolved into smoke. On the final evening, the air carried the weight of closure. The tables were set again, children darting across the sand, cousins clapping rhythm in a game of basketball, while the adults poured wine and filled plates. This time the laughter didn't sound strained, and for the first time all week I felt it was real. Celeste found me apart from the crowd. Her eyes were tired-rimmed in a way makeup couldn't soften. She hesitated before speaking, then finally said, You've always been different. I never knew how to be your mother. I didn't know how to love you the way you needed. It wasn't an apology. But her voice cracked just enough, her eyes glassed just enough that I saw the fracture in her armor. For her, that was as close to truth as she could get. The days that followed told the rest. Aspen quietly disappeared from the family chat, her name no longer mentioned when future plans were made. My father began calling me weekly, sometimes just to talk, sometimes to ask me to meet for lunch. Talia and Lila sent me photos of their kids with captions that said nothing more than "Wish you were here." It wasn't grand gestures. It was something smaller, but it was real. Sienna's video compilation from the week went live not long after. It spread faster than I expected, images of jet skis cutting across the water, pizza lifted steaming from the oven, kids chasing basketballs, barefoot adults clinking glasses under strings of light. Comments poured in, thousands of them. This is what family should look like. The joy feels real here. The Hartwell family brand, so carefully polished for years, had been rewritten by footage they didn't control. A year later, an envelope arrived at my apartment. The handwriting was my father's. Inside was the invitation for the next retreat. No excuses, no disclaimers, no mention of space. Just my name at the top. And a note that said, Aspen is not family. You are. I held it for a long time, tracing the letters like they were carved into stone. For years, I'd begged for a seat at their table, and here it was, offered at last. But I realized I no longer needed it, because I had proven to myself that my worth was never theirs to grant. That evening, I walked down to Tahoe's edge. The lake stretched wide, the same water that had carried my kayak past their frozen stairs days before. The surface shimmered with light, free and untamed. I let the wind press against me and thought, freedom isn't being invited back. Freedom is knowing I don't need their table to exist. And in that thought, I felt the weight lift. The black sheep no longer carried the brand they gave me. I was simply myself, standing on the shore, finally unbound. In the weeks after Tahoe, life moved forward, but the echoes of what happened at Moonlit Haven traveled farther than I expected. Sienna's video had already spread online, but then a lifestyle blog picked it up. The Real Hartwell Gathering. The headline read, and the screenshots were all mine kids laughing in the pool, cousins playing basketball, relatives with their shoes off eating pizza by the fire. The comments weren't about luxury or polish. They were about joy, the kind that can't be staged. It didn't take long before those images eclipsed the carefully crafted posts my mother had kept up for years. She'd built an entire brand on perfection, a family that looked untouchable. Now her followers began asking where I was in the older photos. Some even asked why my ex-wife had appeared so often while I had disappeared. Her silence only fed the questions, and her curated image began to splinter. At Thanksgiving, 3 months after Tahoe, I walked into the house I had once dreaded. For the first time in years, I wasn't given the seat at the end of the table. Ryder pulled out a chair closer to the center, and the cousins cheered when I passed the mashed potatoes. But I noticed how Celeste barely spoke. She lifted her glass to toast the family, but her hand trembled. She had lost control of the picture, and she knew it. Later that night, I found her on the porch. She looked older in the porch light, her makeup no longer able to hide the fatigue. "They talk about me," she whispered, as if the neighbors were listening. "On the internet. About the photos. About Aspen." I waited, not filling the silence for her. She said things about you, and I believed her. It was easier than believing you. Her voice cracked, but she caught herself before tears could fall. "Now they're looking at me like I failed." "You didn't fail me by posting pictures," I said evenly. "You failed me by erasing me while keeping the person who broke me. That's what people see." For the first time, she didn't argue. She looked out at the dark street and said nothing, her breath visible in the cold. I left her there, realizing I no longer needed her admission to validate what I already knew. Back inside, Jackson approached. He had always been the brother who lived in the in-between, never defending me, but never attacking either. This time, he put a hand on my shoulder. I went along with them because it was easier, he confessed. But I know I should have stood up. "I'm sorry." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it mattered. For the first time, I felt the scales tipping toward balance. The story that had been controlled for so long was no longer theirs alone to tell. By spring, the family had settled into a new rhythm. Aspen was gone for good. Her name scrubbed from the group chat, her presence erased from future plans. My father continued to call, his voice less guarded sometimes, even asking my opinion on projects he was considering. Talia sent articles she was proud of, and Lila sent videos of her kids' science experiments. Ryder even asked me to design a playlist for his daughter's birthday party. They weren't big gestures, but they were deliberate. Meanwhile, my life had shifted too. I had taken what happened at Tahoe and turned it into something tangible. With Milo's contacts and Kieran's expertise, I started a small business curating retreats for companies and private groups. Sienna handled the media, Vesper managed logistics, and together we built something real. What started as survival had turned into livelihood. The first time a client told me the weekend I'd created had changed the culture of their team, I realized I had reclaimed the part of me that was always the planner, the connector, the one who knew how to make people feel part of something larger. Summer came, and with it, another letter. This time there was no hesitation. No carefully chosen wording. It was direct. "Julian, we want you at the retreat. We've already set your cabin." It was signed by Victor, but I could see the fingerprints of everyone in it. I went, but not as someone desperate to be included. I went as myself, with my friends and my work waiting back home, with a life that existed regardless of their approval. The retreat was calmer this time. My siblings asked about my projects, my cousins wanted to hear about Moonlit Haven, and even my father lingered beside me at the fire, speaking not as a patriarch, but as a man trying to bridge distance. The night before I left, I walked down to the lake alone. The surface was glass, holding the reflection of the mountains like a secret. I remembered the boy I had been stringing lights in a cabin, desperate to make the family smile. I remembered the man I had become, sitting at the end of the table with a gift card while the others unwrapped treasures. And I remembered standing 9 hours after being erased while the truth finally broke open around us. Now I understood. Freedom wasn't being handed a seat at their table. It was building my own knowing I could walk away and still exist whole. As the wind skimmed the water, I whispered it to myself, a truth I needed to hear in my own voice. I was never the black sheep. I was simply the one who refused to live in a picture frame, and that was enough.